Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's lecture on Latina feminist concepts. The first reading we had to do was about Gloria Anzaldua's Nu Mestiza Consciousness. As we will see throughout the semester, her name will come up over and over again because she was very influential in Latino studies and also in Chicana feminist theory. And her article on Nu Mestiza Consciousness sort of encapsulates the various elements of her theory and a lot of her writing. So in her Nu Mestiza consciousness theory, she was searching for a theory that could adequately grasp the particular experiences of living along the border, where you feel the tension between two cultures, Mexico and the United States. She uses the idea of mestiza as the embodiment of cultural, racial, and historical mixture, as an identity that captured her own experience as a Mexican-American woman whose family has lived for generations along the border. Developing a mestiza consciousness means having an awareness of the mixtures that exist and that she embodies, and using that standpoint to look out into the world. Nepantalism means torn between ways, and is the idea of living in that in-between space where you feel the pull and tug of both sides of the border and are shaped by that constant tension. The borderlands refers both to a sitio or physical space, but also a type of discourse as a metaphor for all of those who relate to living in between spaces and identities. Her theory is a feminist one, as she also meant to construct a Chicana feminist theory that is grounded in Mexican history and culture, but still challenges the machismo and patriarchy within Chicano culture. And finally, her theory is meant also to be healing, recognizing that the experience of the borderlands is also steeped in trauma, and therefore requires a political consciousness that also strives for internal healing. This particular quote best captures what she means by a mestiza consciousness, the kind of aspirational consciousness and awareness that breaks multiple boundaries. As a mestiza, I have no country. My homeland casts me out. Yet all countries are mine because I am every woman's sister or potential lover. I am culturalist because as a feminist, I challenge the collective cultural, religious, male-derived beliefs of Indo-Hispanics and Anglos. Yet I am cultured because I am participating in the creation of yet another culture, a new story to explain the world and our participation in it, a new value system with images and symbols that connect us to each other and to the planet. The second reading for this week on Chicana Movidas really demonstrates sort of a continuation of Anzaldúa theory. And we see this quote by Anzaldúa opening that chapter where it states, "We have not one movement but many. Our political, literary, and artistic movements are discarding the patriarchal model of the hero leader leading the rank and file. Ours are individual and small group movidas, unpublicized movimientos, movements not of media stars or popular authors, but of small groups or single mujeres, many of whom have not written books or spoken at national conferences." So in the article on Chicana Movidas, the author stipulate the various types of movidas or movements that Chicanas have participated in, but they expand the definition of movements beyond the traditional spaces, such as within established organizations. Many historians look within these organizations for the participation or leadership of women, and if they don't find their presence overtly there, they dismiss them. In this piece, the authors argue that we have to look outside conventional political spaces in order to find how women have participated in political activism and organizing. This is where movidas, as described in the quote above, come in. By looking for Chicana movidas, we can find the many ways in which Chicanas have been subversive and strategic in their feminist practices. And as the quote explains, in conventional understandings, a movida can describe multiple kinds of moves, from those undertaken in games and on dance floors, to those that take more subversive forms like forbidden social encounters, underground economies, and political maneuvers. For this reason, movida often carries with it connotations of not only the strategic and tactical, but also the undercover, the dissident, the illicit, that which is not part of approved and publicly acknowledged political strategies, histories, and economic and social relations. And the reading talks about a variety of different types of movidas. Hallway movidas recognizes the ways that women often meet in small clusters in hallways during conferences or other key events that are meant to be about social justice issues, but where they often might feel excluded or marginalized. It is often during these hallway conversations where strategies, networking, and organizing takes place. Homemaking movidas addresses the multiple ways in which Chicanas created spaces for themselves, whether it was to creating a women's caucus within an existing organization, creating study groups to discuss politics, or creating their own aesthetic spaces or creative activist art. The creation of these spaces allowed those who were further marginalized, like lesbian women, to participate in Chicana feminist practices. Movidas of crossing entails the ways Chicanas have organized across identities, national and political borders, often using a global framework for creating coalitions. And finally, memory movidas encompasses all the strategies used by Chicanas to document and pass on their memories of activist work. And in the reading, we saw quite a number of different examples being given for each type of movida, and I'll highlight some of those here. As an example of hallway movidas, the authors talked about Francisca Flores, who was born in San Diego in 1913 and ends up spending a decade in a sanitarium fighting against tuberculosis, where she learns from other patients about the Mexican Revolution that is going on at that time. She helps found the Hermanas de la Revolución, where Mexican women within the sanitarium could have a safe space to talk about political activism. She also helped found the League of Mexican American Women, among other organizations, as we will see over and over again later on. But I think the example here of a hallway movida is that within the sanitarium, while she's trying to get healthier, she creates sort of an alternative space within that space for Mexican women to talk about the revolution that's going on at that time. An example of a homemaking movida is the Chicana student organization Hijas de Cuauhtemoc, which has a connection to Mexican history, naming itself after a feminist Mexican organization that came about during the Mexican Revolution. It builds on the legacy of their activist foremothers, and it began as an informal group to educate Chicanas with the skills to be activists within the student groups in colleges and universities. It ends up becoming an independent group separate from other Chicano student groups, particularly as many of these Chicanas end up having negative experiences within student organizations like Mecha that were male-led. So this organization starts out as a space for Chicana female students to gather together to talk about their issues and also to gain skills for how to do political activist work at the time, and ends up becoming a separate independent organization because of the experiences they have in the more sort of mainstream Chicano student organizations in colleges and universities at that time. Elizabeth Petita Martinez is a good example of movidas of crossing. She was a radical Chicana journalist and reported on Chicana women's issues in relationship to global women's issues. She reported on leftist movements throughout Latin America and other parts of the world, especially during the time period of the 1960s, where there were many national independence movements going on throughout the quote-unquote third world. She founded the Chicanx newspaper El Grito del Norte and was the author of De Colores Means All of Us and 500 Years of Chicana History. And so throughout her career, she not only focused on talking about issues that were relevant to the Chicanx community and to Chicana women specifically. But throughout her entire career of journalism and writing, she covered other social movements, including the Black Civil Rights Movement. She was a member of SNCC and so on. So she really represents sort of this movidas of crossing between different social movements, different global movements, and being able to illustrate the connections between all of them through her writing. And finally, memory movidas. An example of this is Silvia Morales, who's a documentary filmmaker and made the first Chicana film, La Chicana, which I found online and have posted for you as one of the videos to watch for this week. She is one of the first Mexican-American women filmmakers and has created both documentary films steeped in the Latinx community, as well as worked for a number of mainstream media channels and programs. Her most recent film on Chicana motherhood and activism is called A Crushing Love and came out in 2009. And I have added this onto the extra credit page. It's about an hour of film, so I put it there if you'd like to watch it and have it part of your extracurricular extra credit option, or if you just want to watch it in general. I've made it available on the extra credit page on Canvas. And so she represents sort of memory movidas because a lot of her work, especially her documentary work, has been about documenting the history of and experiences of Chicana women, many of which hadn't been known, especially with her first film, La Chicana, which came out in 1979. So it was one of the first things that came out that focused on Chicana women and Chicana women's history, tracing it back to the indigenous history and bringing it all the way to the contemporary times of the 1970s in that particular film. So this ends our lecture for this week. I look forward to your comments online. Have a wonderful week.